Hey there. I've given a few things that I've observed, observer mode, in the woke community. Is I process a lot of information, obviously, and it's always sort of processed in the how do we put this? Looking in the looking glass. Okay. Now I know that I covered, for those that spend any time watching my videos, uh, psychic energy, consciousness, okay? The spin of your Merkaba, the heart wheel, okay? Living through your heart. Powers up the imagination. Next thing you know, you're spinning so fast and your imagination is running, you're in no time. Your consciousness is not held captive by another unit of consciousness. That's why I spend all my time in nature. Because my consciousness is with a higher state of consciousness, which is the great living spirit of Mother Earth. So a couple of things that I wanted to cover that I felt were important, particularly during this moment in time, on the calendar that they use, the Julian calendar. Remember, 7 seconds of more darkness. Okay. You can go back and do the research on the Julian calendar, the Gregorian calendar, the 369, the verse and chapter in Genesis, if you want to take the time to sort of put that together. But we do live in an orchestra of a harmonic universe. If you look at the Mayan calendar, it goes back, as I remember it, 26,000 years. They have what's known as the Baktun harmonics. And it should be not surprising to anybody, coincidentally, that a Nobel Prize winner in physics just happened to mention that in one of his lectures that I caught one time, where he referred to the Baktun harmonics, which ties directly into Terence McKenna and a video that I just watched, which was really more of an audio podcast than it was a video podcast on YouTube, which was called Don't Panic. Okay? Which, depending on who you are and where you happen to be at any particular moment in now time, how you process or perceive the cosmos that you believe that you live in. Because what we believe is based on the energy that we're experiencing. If you don't like the energy, then find out how to be able to either lower it or raise it, depending on what your vibrational niche is, right? So this is where you learn how energy works, how the spiral works, how the DNA works, why the clocks are built into the genetics. Particularly this particular avatar is meant to do what? Go up. Not down, go up. Not going into lower density, heavier matter, but into lighter density. That allows us to experience what? More of the cosmos. Remember I mentioned about the conversation that I had with a gentleman who was, I guess, in his 50s. He was there with his daughter and her boyfriend. And I began talking about the stars and the sun. And you find out that, and this is just an observation, that people live in tunnel vision, which means the energy that they're using to experience who they are in a relationship with everything else that they have an interface with in their little tiny community is void of looking at a star map, perceiving a huge cosmos that is out there, that is full of life, that is thriving. So after the conversation that I had, he was perfectly comfortable with living in a very small world because his consciousness has been held captive by what's known as cultural programming. So if you want to look at cultural programming, one of the things that I did, and this is why I wanted to cover a couple of very important points, deals with cultural programming, demographics, and a time clock. So you can go way back in time and you'll find very similar ways in which energy is being harvested, whether you go back 1,000 years, 10,000 years, or go back 100 years. Okay? And that's simple because all I have to do is look at my own clan and tribal history, where they moved. Remember when the right of conquest, when the the Vatican Empire, the Roman Empire, was sold its title back to basically operate a business again, which is self-indulgence and perversion of nature. Okay, so what did they do? Columbus landed on the shores of America, and what did they do? Pillaged and plundered. Manifest destiny. That's in their own history books. Okay, so now you have a relationship between what? Those races, where if you've ever taken the time to study Meredith Quinn, who was a legal tribal scholar, Lakota, will share with you the nature of that relationship, particularly when it comes to the 6 Aboriginal treaties that are among the tribes which are native here. Okay? So one of the ways in which you can see who's native and who isn't is by how? The relationship that we have with the spiritual body, the living organism of Mother Earth. Okay? That's a good telling point. So when you see that when they came into the Americas to do the same thing that they did in Europe, if you go all roads lead to Rome, remember? They pillaged and plundered, because that's what they do. Okay? They don't have any love to give anybody. They don't want to share anything with anybody. The power that they perceive through their own mind comes to the acquisition of more energy. Okay, so this is where gold, silver, platinum, all those things in their mind represent value to them. Because now they can use that as the means to do what? Get more matter, heavier density matter. So where does this stuff come from? Her. Okay, just like everything comes from her. Okay? And so what ends up happening is you end up in an energy harvesting system, because as an ecologist, and of course I knew this because I immediately went into nature as soon as I came out of my mother's womb, because my spirit is anchored to her spirit, which means I somehow seem to know who she is, because I oughta, because this is her stuff. The DNA assembly that my spirit is in, communicating to everybody on this phone with, is her equipment. This is a platform that she put together that allows my spirit to communicate with everybody else in spirit that is in nature and those that aren't in nature. Okay? So what ends up happening is, if you look at the last 100 years, what were they doing? They came out with all their cannons and all their artillery, bribed and cajoled the scouts, the Indian scouts, because the Indian scouts know exactly how other Indians live and how to get around, but they never got Geronimo. Geronimo turned himself in. So this is where you begin to see the difference between who the native tribes are and the clans and who the aliens are. Okay? Because they have absolutely no love, no respect, no regard, okay, for the land, for the great living spirit of Mother Earth. They see this planet as nothing more than a resource to be extracted, and that means everybody else that comes under their thumb. So when you go into the U.S. House of Representatives and you take an aerial shot of the U.S. Capitol, the United States Supreme Court, okay, you will see the Moloch, the owl. Go look at their money. Go take a look at a dollar bill in the right-hand corner and you'll see the owl. That's the Moloch. Okay? That's blood money. How do they get all that money? They print it, which means it's not backed by anything. And when they say they want to back it by gold and silver, who's backing that money? The girl on the planet is, by the fact that they mine her of all that gold and all that silver. So the reason that I'm trying to tie a ribbon on this, so to speak, is when you go back 100 years and you see that, for example, they were banning all of the tribes from doing what? Conducting their spiritual rituals. Circle of drums, the ghost dance, all of the things that the tribes do to bring the higher energy and spirit out in nature was banned. And instead, they did what? Put us on prisoner of war reservations. That's what they are. They are POW camps. So they put the native tribes, which means this is our home world. Okay? This is our world. We are native here. Put us in POW camps. Okay? Fed all of the tribes alcohol. Okay? Look at the history of what they did to the native people of this planet. Okay? Then you begin to realize who they are and why everything is happening the way that it is. Okay? Because the native tribes that are running the girls' equipment who's in this planet says that's it. So what did they do? They rounded everybody up who were the tribes and the clans that put them in reservations. And what you will see over time throughout the Industrial Revolution is that they wanted to move everybody into what? Cities. Building circuit boards with capacitors and resistors because of all the electrons and the magnetic light that represents a battery or an energy storage device. So there's a reason why they put us in boxes, and then didn't me, but why they put so many millions of people in boxes, in which now all those little batteries are in those boxes that are in those circuit boards, okay? That's called condensation, isn't it? That's density. That's a lot of density units of consciousness that are now together. Heavier density matter population. That are now doing what? They just migrated off the land where they had a relationship with nature. Now they have a relationship with concrete, asphalt, and everything that is pillaged and plundered from nature to do what? Make things. So now this is what I call like a hamster wheel. Everything is now taken from the earth in order to make things, which becomes the jobs or the occupations that people now fill. So this is like taking from the planet, processing it through all the manufacturing processes, and now you end up with what? A toxic waste stream. So this is the input and the output side, that a state of consciousness is pillaging and plundering the energy of the planet in order to have a job, in order to make money, okay, in order to continue their job. So what this means is that this is a parasitic state of consciousness in which millions of people have been programmed to become parasitic by pillaging and plundering the planet and then creating a huge toxic waste stream as a result of that process. Which means we're doing this to ourselves. Pillaging and plundering and then creating a toxic waste stream. So what is the result of all that? Poison the air, poison the water, poison the soil. And what does that mean? It is now coming back on us. Which means this is a result of parasitic consciousness that's been programmed to pillage and plunder and create a huge toxic waste stream, where that toxic waste stream is now what? We are being exposed to that which we created. We created through pillaging and plundering, believing that we needed all these jobs in order to make the money, in order for us to live the way that we do, in order to create a huge toxic waste stream that we are now exposed to, that is creating another cash cow for them, which is what? Their medical industry, of which you have Big Pharma, of which continues to toxify us even more. What do you think the end mathematical result is going to be of that process? Collapse of your own living biosphere. That's self-suicide. Now, what kind of an intelligent being would ever choose to do something like that? Because they didn't know the difference between what they are and what they're not. That's programming. Okay? Now you can see that in what's known as the gematria effects, because I just watched a video this morning on, when was it? About Lamar Alexander, who's a quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens in a game with the New Orleans Saints. And here was a field goal that was going to be kicked by the guy who was with the Baltimore Ravens. And if you are able in your own mind, if you've ever done the geometry, for example, what's known as triangulation, this is where you couple the speed and the velocity of an object. It's, just say, stationary, right? Like there's the ball sitting on the tee, and then you're going to kick the football, right? Well, you can measure the distance between the tee and the upright of the goalpost. Okay, so let's say in this case it's 20 yards, so that's what? 60 feet. Okay, so then you can actually measure the discharge of the electromagnetic energy from the point of contact of the guy's foot, and then look to see how much energy was used to put that football in the lift. Okay, and then you can tell by its trajectory that you can coordinate using geometry the speed and the velocity of that lift as to where it's going to be at a certain point in time. And then what you see is all of a sudden that football begin to just go, whoa. Now, if you did the math on that, the geometric math on that, you realize that's impossible. How the hell did that happen? Steering consciousness. The people in the stands actually made that happen using their consciousness to make that happen that way. How were they able to do that holographically? Programming. Algorithms. Steering consciousness. Not knowing the difference between what they are and what they're not. Because their antennas cannot filter the difference between a thought that belongs to them and one that doesn't. How do you know the difference? That's the advantage of having a heart wheel that spins like crazy and spins your Merkaba, which is your looking glass. Which means you already know what's going to happen in the future because you're spinning your Merkaba that fast to know it, which is a higher density state of consciousness in which you've already experienced what just happened. So you already know the result. That's why if you have an enormous amount of love and empathy for everything that is living in nature, then you already know what the result is going to be, which means you're working with nature. Because the same higher density consciousness to which you are the energy that is in that energy field, there's no separation in the waves of what you're experiencing to be in peace, love, harmony, and balance with nature, that you are with nature. You become one with the great living spirit in Mother Nature. That's why she's the teacher in this classroom. So instead of learning from the teacher to be in peace, harmony, and balance with her, they're choosing to destroy and pillage and plunder in order to have things. Things. Otherwise known as the world of things. Okay? And when everything becomes in our mind all about having things, then your state of consciousness cannot spin your Merkaba at a higher rate of speed to realize how this works and how to move into the higher hyperdimensional realms. So this can be perceived as I did as a child when it comes to knowledge. So for example, Patty can show you because she put her stuff up there on how to make free energy devices. Okay? So what matters here, because this is what I realized, is that just because we have knowledge of science, how to build something, how to put something together, or how to do anything, it's the application and the use of that knowledge which represents your state of consciousness, which can be measured on the electromagnetic spectrum of what we do with that knowledge. So, for example, we can show you how to be a remote viewer. Okay? We can show you how this works. But I know this because it's one of the reasons that I recognized as a child, because of all the testing that they do to see whether or not you're gifted. Because the intelligence agencies and the militaries kidnap empaths because they know that they make great remote viewers. They know how to open stargates. They know how to open wormholes. The original gatekeepers, okay, was to make sure that certain frequency identities are not allowed to get into the upper hyperdimensional realms, particularly when they're parasitic, which means they're using the knowledge that they have in order to acquire and move using technology to get into places they shouldn't be, because they wreck our art galleries. That's why all of Laniakea is in operational security. That's why the 4 control rooms on this planet will vaporize you if you don't have the right core frequency identity to get in. So in other words, just because we have knowledge on how to do things doesn't give us a license to do things with it that don't represent what it means to be in peace, love, harmony, and balance with a great living spirit in Mother Earth. They use it to take advantage of her. They use it to take advantage of everything, to move into places in which they conquer and pillage more of the cosmos. Because that's the nature of what they do. So that's why I realized when I was a child, looking through all of my father's scientific manuals, that all of this knowledge was being used and acquired, particularly from those people who have an unbelievable amount of imagination, creative imagination, because they don't have it. They don't have that kind of infinite life that is using infinite creative imagination in order to perceive things on such a higher level that they can't. That if they have access to that kind of imagination within another being, they want that. That becomes what? A commodity. Because they see everything through the lens of money and power. And all you have to do to test that, is have $500,000 and begin to realize how many people you can pay to get things to do for you. Build yourself an army. Start paying off mercenaries to go take out some political guy down in Argentina. Because that's what they do. Everything is about money because it relates to power over others. Which means they haven't learned how to be able to spin their own light through their consciousness, from which they learn through others to be what love is in service to others. Which means that you naturally are going to spin faster because you're getting more of the energy that represents what the universe is, which is in love with itself. And that energy that we're experiencing, which is what love is automatically, without thinking about it, being shared and broadcast everywhere that we go, which means it's naturally going to be restoring more of what we are. Which means we're restoring the cosmos to a higher rate of speed. From a lower state of density consciousness to a higher state of density consciousness. So that's one of the reasons why I mentioned on a YouTube, because I love this woman for the amount of time and energy she was willing to put into research, which is Deborah Tavares, who has StopTheCrime.net. And a lot of what she puts up is the truth because of the documents that she uncovered. But if it's going to trigger a fear-based response, and as I told her, this is not a time in which you want to reinforce all of the lower density consciousness experiences, because this is a timeline shift, which means this is a separation between love and fear.